And people didn't hear that. People heard misdiagnosis and they were like, so you don't have those, you cured, you don't have those symptoms. And I never said it in the moment because I felt too embarrassed to. But I was like, no, 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 no. All of those things are the same. I have not changed throughout this. I have been a constant. The thing that's changed is the word and the language and the systems around me. And that was lost on people. The amount of people that heard, oh, you've had a misdiagnosis and understood it to be, oh, you're cured. And it's like that's not what happens. And so that was quite an isolating experience. You know, it's funny. I think it actually, and this maybe feels like a tangent, but it feels like a balance between individualism in our health systems versus collective or communal responsibility. And I think it's funny as well because when we think of going to our GP or we think of talking to a specialist, we still think of that as individualistic, even though it's not. Like there's two people in that relationship, but that's not how we train our doctors. It's not how we train therapists. I actually think, funnily enough, the only profession I really know of that centers it, and I'm sure there's more, but peer support workers, which center the collaboration in the relationship. It's funny, I think, when I say about that balance between individualism and collectivist or communal collaborative care and not quite finding the balance for it. I think in that misdiagnosis journey, I think there was a feeling, especially when I left Epi, which is when that revelation happened, there was a sense or feeling of, this is a gift. You don't have this. I'm taking the shackles off you. You can now go and be free. And the experience of that was this identity that I have been building a lot of myself around for the past, I think, 2.5, 3 years at that point is now gone. So the past 2 or 3 years feel like kind of a void that I have to refigure. And also I'm on my own now because the service has gone be free essentially. And which is lovely, and the intention of it is lovely, and it is a lovely thing. But it's also it's forgetting that kind of relational aspect of it because it's letting someone off into the world on their own to now figure out their identity after it's taken a really big hit. And everyone does that, right? That's what life is, figuring out who we are and how we change on a day-to-day basis, like as we move through the world. That's just something everyone does. But there is an additional challenge, I think, with mental health, and especially for more intense experiences of mental health, where it is harder to find people with shared experiences. It's harder to find information. It's harder to find communities where you can see those experiences reflected, where you can see those experiences being managed effectively. And especially the interesting thing of it being misdiagnosed was now the spaces that I would have gone to see similar experiences weren't accessible to me because they weren't my experience by diagnosis, by label, you know. And so it very much felt like, oh, I'm now looking forward and I can't go back there because now the door has been kind of shut behind me. I need to kind of start from scratch again. And it did feel like that. It felt like starting from scratch and kind of shedding the old identity and going into something new. And
there's the part where I feel very unfair to you. You know, that's a part where I kind of felt like where the clinical setting forget about seeing you as a whole person and also taking into consideration of when I first hear it, when you told me, I said, oh, wow, such a great news. But when you're starting to unpack it, I was like, wow, that is so much deeper to it. Because to you, we are, you know, like at that time, it was a critical time of your life. you know, like you're going to finish and you really wanted to hone your skills and there were so many elements in there that no one were guiding you towards. You have to take on that responsibility to unpack all that. Just by believing someone is doing you a good favor without really seeing who is this person sitting in front of me, your intention behind it, because you're always doing it because you want to advocate and educate people. The intention is so no one have to go through what you're going through. And then the third things I think is the most frustrated to me is not even saying it and then ask you, where is that left you now?
Yes. Yeah. It's so true. We don't have any services that exist for misdiagnosis, right? Because that is the end of, at least in a diagnostic medical system, biomedical system, that's the end of the problem. The problem has been solved. And so now the system ends. You've reached the conclusion of it. I was really fortunate that I had a therapist at the time, a therapist that I trusted. I'm still with. He's remarkable.
I think you are remarkable. I just want to put it back, honestly. Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
And sorry, you carry on.
I mean, I was lucky. I was lucky that I had a therapist. I was lucky that that therapist was a really good fit. And also he didn't use diagnoses. He didn't use labels in his language much. He did use them, and he had kind of that academic back. What am I saying? He steered away from labels and diagnoses being the kind of focal point of treatment and support. And again, it was a lovely continuation of that. Let's talk about you. Let's talk about your goals. Let's talk about how you are moving and existing throughout the world and what you want to do, which Epi captured as well really beautifully, and which I think primary healthcare services don't often. Like, it is very much diagnosis focused and kind of mathematical, solve the problem. Like, this is the experience, these are the symptoms, this is the solution. Yeah. And it's true. Yeah, it's in the context of misdiagnosis, because when the problem is solved, you know, but that's not where people finish. Like, people continue to move through the world and
thank God you are strong, to be honest. You know, I will flip the table and say, what?
There was a couple moments of that as well. There was a couple moments of
and then yeah, exactly that. It's just the biggest freaking joke in my life.
Yeah.
So and what upset me as a human being is I know her intention is well as well. I know she wasn't trying to. That's why I think it's the system's fault, because the system create isolation, and the system just seeing this individual being treated in this isolation situation, and that is what I felt most frustrated about the whole mental health services. Is just keep putting it as a like, and that's why people in the end always to you about your resilience, you know, even just finding it back. And even before I say, you know, I'm so happy to see you flourishing. And then, you know, like, because I hearing what I hear and seeing, I know people probably don't even understand the internal, you know, struggle you have to go through to redefine, find yourself, and also having that trust again. I mean, that is what people don't understand. And because we are empath, we're quite sensitive individuals. So we don't just see this like, oh, some people might just think, well, who cares? But you do. You care so deeply that that's why it almost pull you apart again.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm not.
No, I think it's so, it is that. It's so funny. I think that isolation thing is a really important point. I think a lot of my thinking at the moment, both personally for me, and then also in the work that I do now that I'm in a role where I'm making programs and working with community and running events about all different things. A big question that I think I have a lot is, what is the balance of my responsibilities as an individual versus collective or relational responsibilities, and what's the the balance, what's the ratio, and it changes in different contexts. So thinking about myself, like what am I responsible for in terms of my own well-being versus actually what should exist in our healthcare systems to look after us. Like I think there is a responsibility of, and I would agree with you there, of the failings of a system or the blind spots of a system where it is so individualized and it is so problem focused in solving the problem that we forget that people's journeys continue past that. And there is, I think, a responsibility of, cool, you've just finished a really, you've come to the end of a really massive treatment, or you've just had a diagnosis label shift, or how does that feel? Like that's a transitory period that I think people should be supported through and should have conversations through, and that just doesn't exist unless you have that kind of personal connection with a therapist.
And even, like just talking about resilience, how then you have to that no one celebrated for you. It's not like you wanted someone to celebrate, but like what you said, it's such a problem focused.
Yes. I mean, I think that's the thing, right? Is it becomes, and not even to say that it's a positive or a negative, because I think there are both in there, but it becomes such an individualized thing in that instance. You get to the end of that journey, and because there's no follow through, suddenly you are responsible for every aspect of it, for understanding your identity, navigating and recarving your identity, having conversations with family and friends, looking at your well-being systems, routines, and if they have to change. What was interesting about the misdiagnosis as well, and I think this is something that was lost on especially friends and family, was that none of the symptoms changed. It was only the word.
No, that is a question.
And people didn't hear that. People heard misdiagnosis and they were like, "Oh, so you don't have those? You don't have those symptoms?" And I never said it in the moment. I felt too embarrassed to. But I was like, no, 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 no. All of those things are the same. I have not changed throughout this. I have been a constant. The thing that's changed is the word and the language and the systems around me. And that was lost on people. The amount of people that heard, "Oh, you've had a misdiagnosis," and understood it to be, "You're cured." And it's like, that's not what happens. And so that was quite an isolating experience.
I was happy because of the title, the label schizophrenia, because that's the worst label. I was happy in that sense, and also the reason why I want to share and acknowledge what you've gone through is because for anyone going through mental health issues like myself, I know the journey never been easy. People thought it's easy. It's like, live in my world and see how you handle it.
Yeah.
And anyone came out from the other side, it's never been a smooth run.
No.
It looked like, then now like the amount of work, challenge you have to, pull yourself out again and again. It's not normal for anyone to understand.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah. And it's funny, like that, again, thinking about like that balance of individual responsibility versus collective care. I remember being really frustrated in those moments. One, angry at myself for not being able to kind of say that wasn't what was happening. Symptoms are the same. I'm just understanding them differently. Like the diagnosis shift was useful in some ways because it made me question the language that I use to describe my experiences. So my language became more accurate. And as my language became more accurate, my understanding of what my experiences were became more nuanced and more accurate. And as that understanding grew, I was able to take better care of myself because I understood what the causes were, what my reactions to just daily living was. I was able to set up my routine and make changes that were positive overall. And that's a very individual process. And in that sense, the misdiagnosis and being told about it was really useful because that was skill acquisition for me. I learned how to take better care of myself. I understood myself better. And so in that sense, and that's a very individual responsibility kind of realm, a big positive.
You know, when you're talking about this, what come into my mind is like you're doing a clay pot. You know, like you finally mold it into a shape where you're proud of. And then these things they came over, like, oh, it's wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
But now you have to start all over again. And that's why I think you have such a good insight now with your job.
Yeah.
To really see how to shape it into a better space.
Yeah. Do you know what's funny? I love that metaphor. I love that metaphor. With script writing, there's a really scary exercise you can do with script writing where once you finish a draft, usually your first draft, you bin it, you destroy it, and then you rewrite the whole thing from memory. The idea being that what sticks, I know it's a terrifying exercise, but the idea being what sticks is the stuff that's really memorable, that resonates. And so actually, as you do that, you naturally get rid of the fluff that you don't need, and what stays with you is the really good, impactful, terrifying exercise because it involves destroying and saying goodbye to a whole bunch of really hard work, but lots of people swear by it. And it feels like a similar thing, right? Like terrifying to do.
So you experience it in your study, like where you had to restart the script.
Heck yeah.
Look, that's crazy. So thank God you have that training.
Listen, again, like even in that way, like it really does lived experience informing creative practice and vice versa. And they really do.
And you know what? That's why I enjoy talking to you so much, because the layer of it that I enjoy the most is the layer of it I can unpack with you. It's like we can see.
Was down, right?
Yes.
But it really is. So in that sense, the misdiagnosis journey was a positive. There was a lot of individual gain from that. At the same time, I definitely noticed a couple of years into that journey that I was, so I say hyper independent. That's not accurate at all. I've never been that good at looking after myself. But as I practiced those skills, I also realized that my ability to share it with other people was decreasing, becoming less and less. My experience to navigate those things in relationships, so with my family, with my friends, suffered a little bit. And it's tricky because 2 or 3 years into it, I started to reflect on that, and I thought, oh, my understanding for myself has strengthened through this process, but my ability to navigate it in relationships has worsened. What's caused that? And then that's when I started to think about it or frame it in that sense of, oh, of course, I've been doing this by myself. I've not had any relational systematic support for this kind of misdiagnosis journey process. And I think that's again why I think that balance is so important. Like, what is the balance of individual responsibility versus collective responsibility in anything? And so I look back at that journey and I'm like, oh, okay, the balance was off. My individual responsibility was up here. Collective responsibility was not existent. And that ratio is not super off, but like you need a little bit more collective care and a little bit less individual responsibility. Like 70-30, maybe. Like still mostly my responsibility to manage my experiences and come to my own understanding of it, as we all must do. But it would have been nice to have language to talk about it with friends. It would have been nice to have even my GP at the time be like, hey, this is really big. Do you want to talk about it? Do you want to? I don't even know if that kind of pathway exists for that conversation, but that was lacking. And I think now I look back on it and I think, oh, if that pathway existed to talk about it with my GP, if more information existed to share with my friends so I could talk about it with them, if it was more of a mainstream conversation so my friends already knew and they knew how to start the conversation, you know, but none of that kind of exists, which means the collective ability to respond to that in relational ways decreases. And so individual responsibility has to increase. And I find that it's so often that's the case, right? Like if we diminish someone's individual agency or ability to look after themselves, then the collective or a system has to cover the difference. And if it can't, you get a whole bunch of violence and harm happening and systematic failures. But conversely, systems take too much responsibility. Is that the...
Yeah, I know
Too much.
exactly what
But-
I know because you talk. Well, man, exactly because you're saying there's certain elements that you need to unpack it and come to an understanding what this means to you. Yes, that belongs to you. No one can help you. But you're also saying because we are so focusing on individualized and forget about this, especially in a system where they still have a space to nurture individual in a space where they are vulnerable. You are not asking them to rescue you. You are saying, come together and help you to facilitate the kind of discussions that you needed.
Yes.
You also, it was just so new to you, like now you can articulate it. At the time, you are confused. It was like,
Yeah.
what's this mean to my life? And no one, like say, this happened before. Let's, like your professional here, we're not going to tell you what you should do, but we are going to stand by you and help you to figure out what this mean to you. But there's no, and everybody was just, oh yeah, misdiagnosis.
George. Yeah.
But you inside is like crumbling. It's like no one.
Yeah.
And man, and that's why when I hear what you're saying, so easy. I learned that as well when I first hear you. My reaction was like, ooh, and I was like, yeah, I know what you mean. Is that I would felt the same, and especially so complicated because you were still at the age where you developing your identity, you're trying to figure out who you are, looking at the world, and all that came to you. How can you say any otherwise? There's no other reference allow you even to have a blueprint to say. That's why you have to make it out, and your outlet is creativity, and that is your language of love, your language of expression, or language of who you are. And now I can sit here 53 and share that with you. It's like, I wouldn't have a clue if I were you. I would be freaking lost.
I think that's the experience of a lot of people as well. Not even to do with like misdiagnosis. I think just in our mental health system in general, right? Like that is so many people's experience of just figuring stuff out, trying to figure stuff out, not having information, resource, support, spaces, examples to back that up. And if you don't have that, then it's the only thing you're relying on is your individual capacity and the tools and the skills that you may or may not have at that moment. And yeah, it's really hard because if you don't have those skills, which lots of us don't, we're not taught that, we don't see it in our lives, and it is something that has to be learned. If you don't have those skills, then yeah, suddenly you're in a place where you want to try and figure out your identity. You want to put language to your experiences and understand them, but you just aren't able to. And in a lot of ways, I think that's where I find a lot of perspective because I had resources and I had support and I already had a couple of skills as well to be able to navigate that journey. And it was a hard journey. It was uncomfortable and there was a lot of guilt and there was a lot of anger and frustration and uncertainty and confusion. I had support to kind of come through it. And then in retrospect, look back at it and be like, okay, cool. Now that I'm on the other side, I can kind of put pieces in place and I can kind of understand that experience a little bit better. Yeah, if people don't have access to those supports and they don't already have the tools, I can imagine that being just not impossible, but a deeply, deeply challenging experience and an experience where it's so easy to just find yourself making guesses and hoping that stuff works, but having no reference to know if what you're doing is correct, if the language you're using is correct, if the well-being management that you're using for yourself is correct.
That take me to the side way where I also want to talk to you about your work, because I think that's why you now so good with what you're doing, because I can see everything you put in is not. It's very different when someone doing their job just as a job and doing as a job as learning so much about themselves and the world that they really want to shape the future outcome of the people and having a different kind of conversations that can happen. And, that's what I saw. I'm really fortunate enough. I really feel like just blessed to even meet someone like you, where we kind of, I felt like, I understood what you're saying, what you're doing, because I know you're someone who really go inside, dig something so deep that to transform into work, not just a surfer, touch base done. You really do that.
I hope so. I try to. Thank you. That's
I can sense it. Like that's what you. Yeah. So would you like to share?
Yeah. No. Yeah. Also, I am not very good at receiving compliments. Hear me doing like,
no, we all are. I'm not. I'm very good at giving people compliments. I'm not good at receiving myself.
Nope. The work. I mean, now so much of the work, I ask that same question. I ask, what am I responsible for, especially as someone who's in a position of power in the work that I do, position of power in that I am part of an organization. That organization applies for and occasionally receives funding. An organization that creates projects and leads those projects. So power in that I walk into spaces and I'm a facilitator, or I'm not in charge or leading a space, but there's a dynamic, there's a hierarchy there. And I think one of the questions, just to kind of connect it to what we were talking about before, one of the questions I often ask is, okay, what is my responsibility as a facilitator or someone who is kind of holding space? What is the responsibility of the space itself that we're creating? What does it need to be able to accomplish? And what is the responsibility of the people and the participants coming into it, both individual for them, and then also in relationship, like what is our responsibility together? And again, it comes back to the idea of whenever we're creating a program or we're creating a resource or we're sharing information, what is the balance between individual responsibility or our responsibility and the responsibility of people that we work with? Because if that balance is off, I think that's one of the biggest considerations that we make, making sure that we are providing just enough support so that people can come in and have support, the support that they need, have access to the information that they need, but also that we're not doing too much leading, too much kind of taking too much responsibility of the space, that other people can't also come into it and manage their own agency, their own behavior, that they can't make their own decisions around the skills in the room, that they can't make their own decisions around how they want projects or events or spaces to be run. I mean, like the essence of co-design, this idea that we do it together. So much of my thinking at the moment, at least, is around how can I do just enough that people feel supported, but also not too much that people... Because that's the thing. If you do too much for people, then it's the same in our healthcare systems, right? We get not complacent, but we forget that we have agency and that we have control over these things as well. We have control and a say in what we do and what we say and how we say it and how we interact with people. If someone comes in and makes all those decisions for us, we forget that we have that power. We forget that we have that agency. Sometimes we get complacent. I mean, I think we talked about it last time when I was diagnosed in the UK. a lot of the conversations were around, we're going to set you up on working on, I can't remember what it was called. We're going to set you up on the benefit.
Yeah.
We're going to manage this for you. We recommend that you drop out of university so that we can look after you more. It was all this idea of, we're going to look after you. We're going to look after you. Which again, the intention is lovely. The intention is the care and to support, and especially for schizophrenia at the time, crisis support. But I look back on that now and I feel very grateful that in the moment where the choice in that setting at that point was drop out of university or stay in university and not receive the care that was being offered to me, or drop out of university and receive it. That kind of felt like what the ultimatum was. I'm sure it wasn't.
Yeah. I hear you, because I know exactly because they are so risk averse.
Yeah.
That they almost tend to you, if you take on that much of responsibility, this might occur again. If a repeated thing, we will be hands off because you're not listening to us. There's always that subtle hint about you have to, I hear you.
And it's totally risk averse. It is either we need to be completely in control of this because we can't be responsible for anything happening for lots of reasons, for punitive reasons, for public image reasons, for just personal feelings of responsibility. And if we can't be completely in control of it, then we want nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
Because middle ground is risky. Middle ground is really risky. And I feel proud of myself. Oh, that's a weird thing to say. I feel proud of myself that in that moment,
I was thinking in my head, like, thank God. It was like, no,
I've not always made the brave decision, but I'm glad that in that moment I did. And I said, actually, I don't want to do this. I want to continue with my master's. I'm using it to understand what's going on for me. It's a really useful tool. I don't want to lose it.
They must be thinking you are nuts.
No, there was a lot of, they couldn't, I mean, that's the thing, like, they can't stop you from doing that.
Exactly.
They can look at you like you're making a horrible decision.
Yeah, because no cheering squad there is like saying, wow, you're having such a hard time, you still want to do this, bravo, let's see how we can support you.
None of that.
None of that. I hear you. Yeah.
Just like, we think it's a really bad idea and we want to make sure that you're taking care of yourself. Are you taking care of yourself? I don't know. I think I am. It feels like a good decision. Yeah. I'm glad that I did that.
Yeah.
And I think that I remember that whenever I'm making decisions now, even in my work, I'm like, I don't want to do too much for people that they would ever forget that they have the ability to make those decisions for themselves, even when it's uncertain, even when it's scary to do so. A lot of the work that I think I do in my facilitation at the moment in co-design, but also just in community as well, is it's not safety netting, but it's supporting and holding and navigating those feelings of uncertainty, those feelings of people realizing that they have that agency, that they have the ability to kind of do things they might not have thought possible. Not possible. Sounds like a motivational speaker, but to navigate that uncertainty and that identity formation and figuring out what works for them and what doesn't. A lot of the facilitation that I think I do is often it's not doing very much at all. It's just being ready to kind of offer up a suggestion or a reinforcement or a question or whatever it kind of looks like in the moment. But just being ready as people kind of build that individual responsibility and they realize what they want to be responsible, what they can be responsible for, and also what feels good to be in control of, what feels good for them to manage.
And I was just say another. It's like someone really want to fly a kite, and they're not too sure about the wind directions, or they might not in the right ground, and you're not taking that joy for them to fly the kite.
Yes.
You're just saying a few things that, you might need to think about the wind directions, and this is a low ground. I don't think you're going to catch the wind. Let's go and find somewhere else where
different environment. Yep.
Yeah, but you don't want to take away that kite. Let me fly it for you. Now you can play.
Stupid child.
But that is awesome.
100%. Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, at the same time as doing that, you are looking, because it's not, again, it's never, they're never going to be 100%, like, especially if it's an event or a workshop or co-design or whatever, like there is a limit to what we're asking of people, of individuals. So in the back of your mind, you're also thinking, cool, as an organization, our responsibilities are this. As Titiriti, our responsibilities are this, thinking about the collective and the cultural responsibilities. As practitioners, like we have these responsibilities. So you've got that kind of going in the back of your mind, but it's always thinking about that balance. It's always thinking about that relationship between how much are we asking of people, how much of ourselves are we bringing into the space, and what is the collective responsibility, the organizational, the collaborative responsibility. And when you get the balance right, yeah, that feels like the sweet spot.
I like what you described because I have never heard someone who able to articulate co-design so well.
I think, yeah.
Everybody keeps saying co-design, but no one actually able to articulate. You know, like it's not taking away that responsibility, but also being mindful who you are standing in the room and looking at the audience.
100%.
Yeah. And that's what I mean, like you have so much experience that now you can bring it into your role and really asking tough questions that probably clinicians or someone who have not been in your shoes able to ask those questions.
I think it's interesting being in this role, being in a role. This is my first kind of professional full-time role. It's giving me a nice opportunity to put that kind of skill, that facilitation skill, into the context of like research and co-design. It's interesting. Co-design is an interesting one because at the moment it's in some spaces it's being attacked, I think, as not being effective. And it's always interesting when we hear that, because part of me is like, we've not even scratched the surface of how this works and how to do it effectively. Like we're shooting it dead before we even begin. Because it is so much of co-design feels like that. Feels like actually, what does it mean to meet in this space, in this process, from the beginning together, acknowledging who we are, acknowledging what we bring, acknowledging the dynamics and the power dynamics and the experiences in the room. And then from that, and that kind of uncertain beginning and figuring it out and learning about each other. And then from that, building a process from scratch, from up there.
Because you know why I said you articulated so well, because I talk or work in the past, I hear so many people talking about co-design. No one ever once mentioned about the people, the audience, the participant, and really look at the skill set and what they can offer. And so the co-design is not taking away that individual autonomy and the interest and the passions, but creating something from the organizations that lift 100%. What they already have.
100%. And you know what it is as well? I think it goes back to that idea of risk that you mentioned earlier. I think organizations, and actually being a part of an organization and working with other organizations, has been a really useful learning experience for me. Just to feel and trying to understand and be empathetic as well to it, because I think it's a deeply challenging thing that gets in the way, is that idea of risk. And how do organizations, especially big organizations, when they're dealing with funding, when they're dealing with public recognition, public facing image, their reputation, and also so many of our organizations, especially in mental health, especially in politics, are kind of used as chess pieces a little bit. And so the work that we do has to not only be effective, it also has to look good. It also has to be something that a politician can turn into a soundbite. And that's a lot of pressure to put on an organization. And actually, it takes them out of the work, because suddenly they're not thinking about the work, they're thinking about needing this output. And that introduces an element of fear and an element of risk. And I think it means so often we go into co-design. The most common issue that we have with co-design, especially in the beginning, actually there's two, but one of them is we go in and organizations have already done a whole lot of work on what they want the output to be. They say that they're doing a co-design, right? They say that they're doing co-design, and you walk in and they're like, here, we've built this. What do you think? They've already done all the work. I agree. And it's like, cool, you're no longer doing co-design. That's consultation. That's a different thing entirely. And there's nothing wrong with that, but call it what it is.
I agree.
Right? And we look at I think, at least at Changing Minds, when we look at the reasons for that, we look at the motivations, it really does feel like the reason why that happens is because of risk and because of anxiety and fear. That work that people do beforehand is this feeling of, oh, I need to come with something. I need to find the right answer. I need to prove that I'm doing the work. I need to prove that, and this is an individual thing and an organizational pressure as well. We need to prove that we're doing the best that we can and that we're showing results. Here we've come with something prepared. Aren't you happy we've done the work for you?
So well put.
You know, and it comes from fear. It comes from fear. And that fear is caused by a lack of funding and uncertainty around funding. A sense that lack of funding leads to competition. It leads to people not trusting each other. It leads to gatekeeping. It leads to hoarding information that could be mutually beneficial. And it kills collaboration dead before you even begin.
Absolutely.
And then you have people coming in and being like, see, co-design doesn't work because people don't collaborate. And it's like we don't have the environment where actually co-design could work at the moment.
Exactly.
We need to go back a couple of steps. And there was a second thing. What was the second thing? Yeah, the second thing I think that gets in the way of co-design, it's also a fear and an anxiety thing. At Changing Minds, when we go into processes, because people want to. This is the thing. People think that there's a reluctance to engage lived experience or a reluctance to get lived experience in the room. There's actually not. There's actually a lot of desire to have lived experience voices in there. But what happens is, and a lot of the work that we at Changing Minds do, I think, in those very early stages when we're setting up co-design, is convincing people that it will work, convincing people to give it time and space, and also convincing people that, or not convincing, but reminding people that at the beginning of co-design, at the beginning of collaborative process, there's always a stage of getting to know each other, understanding who's in the room, understanding the experiences and the bias and the power dynamics and the language. Like there's so much to figure out. The nuances of a space, the catalyst, the chemical reaction that happens when different people come together is intricate and tricky and fascinating and beautiful, and the whole point of it. But it's a process that takes time to figure out.
Yeah.
And so much of the work that Changing Minds does, I think, again, this is that facilitation role, is kind of comforting and providing space for organizations to step into that and be anxious about it and know that it will happen, and just to sit with it and sit with the process and trust it. Trust is just the thing I wish every organization carried with them a little bit more. Just trust that the process will work.
Yeah.
Because as soon as that trust falters, as soon as they give into the anxiety, that's when you leave a meeting and someone comes back the next meeting and they're like, we've built it. We've built it. And it's like, no, you've killed it. You've killed it dead.
Yeah.
You cannot jump the gun. If you jump the gun, you break down that relationship building. You break down the pathways, the possibilities, the potential for people to slowly bring their experiences into it.
I wholeheartedly agree with you. All the elements, all the layers you just covered, because that's what I keep seeing as well. Like you get people together, and then when the trust is not there, when people came with a different agenda because there's funding involved, and people say they want to help, but then they're there for themselves. How do you even, which is what you beautifully pointed out, is like the facilitator have to so attune with what is the dynamic in that conversation, and also able to see, like everybody will throw something in, but it's like in this mess, what is really something useful? Because people might say things for their own agenda, but then it's not gel, and then it's like, where do you go and find a pile of whatever there to really say this is going to work together and people feel comfortable? And not many people, as you rightly point out, have that skill and able to be so transparent and allow that to work through representing an organization, being mindful about. I mean, there's a beauty with peer, I think, it's because quite often we are there, understand what we had gone through, and our motivation wasn't motivated by professionalism, another certificate we need to gain. We don't have that. And we're really there because we have walked through something that we know how hard it is. And so we believe now there's a space for us to offer, and we just want to come together.
So I completely agree. I think the strength of peer support, there are many strengths of peer support, but I think one of the most beautiful is that peer support, when done well, is about creating space and time for a relationship and a collaborative relationship to form. Within a professional context, that's the expertise of peer support, but it is a collaborative relationship. It is an experiential relationship, with safety and boundaries and everything. And it's an interesting one with peer support because, and I think this is a conversation that we're about to go into as a sector that's going to be really important, which is now that peer support workers are becoming more and more widespread and more accepted, there's questions around how do we standardize, how do we provide guidelines around best practice for peer support workers? And as we do that, I think one of the really key things that we need to be aware of is that we don't rob peer support workers of the time and space that they need to build those relationships. I do think we need to reframe why that time and space is so important.
Yeah.
Part of me thinks that, especially with early peer support, the reason they were given time and space is because professionals didn't think that what they were doing was useful. So peer support workers were given free rein to be like, yeah, go do whatever you want to do, because it was looked down on. And somewhat, like that gave peer support workers the time that they needed to flourish and build relationships. And that is the strength of the work. And our peer support workers are coming back to professionals and saying, look, this is the relational work that you are missing. And over time it's built, and now it's becoming more and more of a respected profession, as it should be. And it's interesting as peer support work builds, and that question of how do we decide what best practice and guidelines and qualifications look like, that professional kind of presence, meeting it a little bit more seriously. I hope we don't lose that ability to have time and build relationships, and for the work to based on experiences, experiential and relational.
Just want to say thank you again for your time, and
Thank you for
what an honor.